Hi Wild Things, I am back as promised to do a follow-up video on my In Search of the Antidote reaction series now that Carrie has started touring the album and has left so many clues and Easter eggs in her tour outfits, in her tour visuals, in her tour lighting cues. Obviously now I have so much more context through which to understand the album and to understand the story arcs on the album, as well as the storylines within the tracks. I also have some more clues about who the muses are, so I've definitely changed my mind about some things when it comes to the album. So I'm going to do a follow-up video here in this video to my previous In Search of the Antidote reaction video, which was obviously filmed immediately post-release without any of the context that Carrie's added since the album dropped. I'm going to add way more context based on all the In Search of Antidote tour Easter eggs, which I would strongly recommend you go back and watch my previous video before continuing with this one if you have not watched it already, because that'll give you vital context to why I've changed my mind about some things. And I'll also add in any other little clues and Easter eggs about any more context about the songs that Carrie's provided since the album dropped, because she has also done some more interviews that has added vital context to the storyline of the album. So I'll be adding in some more things. I'll be referencing the Pretending music video as well, because obviously since that dropped, I realized that song is way more about me than I originally thought. So if you haven't watched that reaction video, I'd recommend going back and watching that as well before you continue with this one. Carrie's been saying some stuff and it's made me change my mind about some things. There's a lot of things from my previous video that I think will stay the same, and a lot of the deep dive analyses on some of the songs, particularly the first half of the album, will mostly be the same. However, how the album ends and kind of the storyline that she's kind of painting, I think is a little bit different now based on, the more context that I've gotten, and now understanding that, more of the songs are potentially about me than I originally thought. So that's what this video is going to be. It's going to be unpacking all of that, using all the extra information we now have to flesh out the storyline and concepts, and do more track deep dives. Let's get into the video. So I want to start with a review on what I originally thought was the chronological timeline that I outlined in my previous video in part 2 of this series. I now have updated opinions on the chronological timeline of things. And so I think the chronological timeline now starts with Two Things Can Be True. And I think that is the start of the chronological timeline, first of all, because in a recent interview, Carrie mentioned that this song was about falling for straight girls, and this is something super, super, super from her past. And also, she chose not to include it in her In Search of the Antidote tour set list. She chose to use it for sound check instead. And I think that's deliberate, because the way that she's separated her tour is she's essentially categorized each song into one of two muses, which tells me that this song is about neither of those muses, which I think is why she left it off the set list, because it's not about the muses, so it doesn't fit into the set list the way that, she intended for the set list to kind of pan out, and the story that the set list is telling through this contrast between the two muses. So I now think, to be honest, if you watch my last video, I did say that I thought it was first chronologically in the timeline, but I just put it where I thought she wanted people to think that it was, based on who she was leading people to believe that song was about. But obviously, now that she started touring the album, and it's just very clear that, none of the songs are about Kelsey Ballerini. She was always a front guy. I'm definitely going to change the chronological timeline order now that, I think Carrie's made it pretty clear that that's, not the case. And so I think chronologically, after Two Things Can Be True, we go through the first Muse timeline, which starts with Crush, which was when Carrie and Shannon were breaking up. Then the first half of Joyride, which seems to be set when they were filming the sex tapes, when they were filming the music video for the song Bitter in particular, seems to be where she's kind of pinpointing the timeline of that song starting, the first half of that song starting. The third song in that Muse's like chronological timeline is Ego Talking, which I think is kind of talking about the time where, you know, they're officially letting each other go. And yeah, Carrie's obviously realizing that Shannon's moved on. And, you know, I think it does make sense for those two things to co-occur in the same song, for there to be the song to kind of start with, okay, like we're letting each other go, you're going to move on and find someone better. And then, you know, Carrie realizing that Shannon has, you know, moved on to someone else. It makes sense that those two things occur in the same song, given the short time frame in which those two things exist. And then I think chronologically we have Maybe I Am Next, like, which basically seems to be set just after Carrie's burned her world down by releasing Becky's So Hot. Then Doing Better, which obviously is set in between Girl of My Dreams release in September 2022 and December 2022. And then the final song in chronological order when it comes to the first Muse is Errors of Us. I still stand by my sentiment that that song is supposed to be kind of last in chronological order to reinvigorate a lot of the sentiments from the first song in chronological order about this Muse. So a lot of the sentiments in Crush kind of like carry over to Errors of Us, and you get a lot of sharing of that kind of, description of like what state a person puts you in, and kind of like that juxtaposition of the highs and the lows, the good and the bad. I think, Errors of Us comes last to, kind of reinvigorate a lot of those sentiments that were illustrated in the song Crush. And then, obviously is a song used with the intention of like closing out the storyline of the first Muse. Like the way that Carrie does that, I think I described like pretty well in my last video, so go and watch that if you haven't already. And then the songs for the second Muse in chronological order, or I guess you could say the third Muse if you're counting Two Things Can Be True as the first Muse. I kind of feel like for the purposes of this album, there's really like most of the storyline revolves around contrast between the main two Muses, so I kind of don't really count that. But yeah, the other Muse, I'm going to call them the Sunshine Muse, because if you've watched my last video, like that's who they are in the story, which I'll talk a little bit more about in this video. The chronological order for the storyline for the second Muse seems to be Attached to You, Lead Me On, Pretending, Joyride, and Antidote. And these are the songs that I'm mostly going to be going over in this video, given that we've had more context and clues that these songs were way more about me than I originally thought, particularly Attached to You, Pretending, and Joyride. Now that we have a bit more context, I'm obviously a bit more, aware of like where these songs fit in the storyline and how they're contributing to the narrative, which I think is a little bit deeper and richer than I had originally thought. I think these songs are set in very particular points in our connection and speak to a very particular thing happening. So that's mostly what this video is going to be about. It's mostly going to be about this second half of the chronological order, to do with our connection, and the story I think she's telling in the second half of the album, like chronologically, and what I think that changes in terms of like the story arc of the album, and like the kind of the point that she's trying to make. That's mostly what this video is going to be about. It's mostly going to be about this second half of the album and clarifying what I think all the songs are about now that I've, seen more references to me in the tour, like visuals and set and costumes and things like that. Like it's made me change my mind a bit about these songs and what I think they're about. So that's going to be this video. We're going to be going over these last songs. And after we do, I'm going to show you what I think the intended listening order of the songs are, like when I'm talking about that narrative, because I think while this is the chronological order of like when things happened, I think there is a different timeline that Carrie might I think there's a different order that Carrie wants you to hear the album in, and I think she has been leaving clues of the order that she wants people to leave the album in, so I'll talk about that at the end too. I think for the purpose of actually explaining what was going on, it makes sense to kind of keep it chronological. But yeah, when we get to the end of like explaining chronologically what happened and what I think these songs are referring to now, then I'll go through, what I think the intended listening order of the album is, because it is slightly different to the way the album came out, and then also slightly different to, the chronological timeline of things. And I'll show you the clues that Carrie's been leaving to indicate that that's how she wants people to listen to the album and absorb the album. That will be today's video. The funny thing about the song Attached to You was that I had originally predicted that this song was not going to be about me, that it was going to be about Carrie's attachment issues in relationships in general, because I was like, well, we're in a unique situation where, there's obviously a marketing strategy at play that's affecting like how she's showing up in this connection. So she kind of can't, there's going to be not a lot here that she can kind of draw on to talk about attachment issues, I had assumed. And so I was like, surely the song has to be about just attachment issues in general, because she's not like, this situation kind of doesn't apply to this situation just based on, there's obviously other forces that are kind of like twisting her arm when it comes to like how she's showing up in this connection currently. It has come up in our connection before when she made this TikTok, which was essentially about like her wanting intimacy, but also, kind of fearing it a little bit. And I was like, at the time when I made my prediction video, I was like, I don't understand how she would make a song out about that though, because like, while I think those attachment things are definitely true for her, and I've definitely experienced, like a flavor of that fearful avoidantness. I was like, but it doesn't apply to the situation. So like, I would really struggle to see how the song could end up being about me. And so when the song came out, even though I could see a few references in like the chorus and verses and things to stuff that I've said, or to like our bits and things, I was like, I think those are just like little Easter eggs and the song's not about me. Like I was still kind of like, waving it off as like not about me when I first listened to the song. I was just like, she's just, drawing on me a little bit, but, I think the song's just about attachment issues in general. But then I saw all of the lighting cues in Search of Antidote tour visuals, like the purple lights coming down, all the black and white kind of visuals, the imagery, and then the golden lights shooting up. And I was like, hang on a minute. I'm starting to put two and two together about what this song is about. Now, I think the song is potentially about where Carrie was coming from when she agreed to the situation we're in, when she agreed to this marketing strategy, because the thing is, like, two things can be true. Obviously, I don't want to take away from the fact that there's obviously a powerful entity involved that has Carrie under a legally binding contract that's worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And when that, like, entity loans Carrie money for like projects, obviously they're going to want some sort of like guarantee that they're going to get a really good return on that investment. And so obviously they're going to ask for a like really big gimmick to go with, like marketing the album. And, in Carrie's case, potentially that was going to be a much bigger gimmick given like what she was willing to do for them when it came to the marketing of Becky's So Hot. Like she really like held her personal life up on a platter for them. So like, the thing about these like powerful entities is you got to be careful what you give them, because if you can give them the world and they will ask you for more, you know what I'm saying? And so, like, I'm not surprised at all that the situation is what it is. And I do think I need to make a video talking about all this marketing and talking about exactly what I think was marketing when it came to Becky So Hot and what was true. And like how things were getting kind of twisted for a gimmick. And then talk about the original marketing strategy for Carrie and I. And then, the revised one and like all of the, kind of clues of how things changed and like who was involved in what decisions and, kind of how things went. So if you want to come back for that marketing video, I would suggest subscribing right now, because I'll probably make that next. I do think I need to go into much more detail about all of this sort of stuff and like what I've unpacked based on what's been available online for me to like consume and like learn about this situation. But anyway, back to my point, which is that while there's a very powerful entity involved that's going to want a marketing strategy and going to want a gimmick and going to want a bigger gimmick than what happened in the last, the gimmick for the last album, the gimmick for Girl of My Dreams, which, I think is why this gimmick was like so out of control. At the same time, like, it's not like Carrie's locked in a dungeon and shackled and has absolutely no say. You know what I'm saying? Like, obviously she's in some sort of container in which she can be creative. And, like, there has to be some sort of mutual agreement that it's kind of like big enough and good enough. But, like, at the end of the day, like, she's still like agreeing to things. I mean, we can argue that it's a little bit like coerced agreement, given that these like entities have like these artists under legally binding contracts that are worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, that can really, if enforced, like really like change the trajectory of an artist's career and like potentially put them in financial ruin. So, like perhaps it's like not as much of a choice as it seems, but at the end of the day, it's also like, I think, this song is potentially about Carrie trying to own where she was coming from when it comes to like what inside of her was like making her agree to this situation. Like, we could debate the like the like shades of gray of like how much of a choice it was, but like, I commend her for like trying to own like what was it inside of her that like potentially helped exacerbate or enable the situation, regardless of who has the most power to twist anyone's arm, and like what the limitations and restrictions are, and like what the consequences of choosing different would have been. Like, at the end of the day, like, I commend her for like trying to own like what it was inside of her that like maybe led her to make certain choices right at the beginning, because I'm assuming that inception of the song is basically when she did post this TikTok of like the attachment issues. Like, I think, this all would have been agreed to like way before she posted that, potentially way before I even made my first YouTube video where I was like, hey, I have a crush on you. Like, potentially when Carrie was making all of those really subtle kind of like flirty videos, like way at the start, like for the month before I said anything, potentially like the agreement was made in that time. Like, I really think it was, just based on how everything's panned out. And yeah, like, I think, both that TikTok that Carrie made where she was talking about having attachment issues was maybe her trying to own like what place she was in when she agreed to the like marketing strategy. But then also I think this song is like an evolution on that TikTok, in the sense of like, yeah, Carrie's trying to own, where she was coming from when she agreed to this marketing strategy, or like what was it inside her that made it seem like more of a good idea than maybe what it was. And the reason why I think that's what the song is about is because after I saw the tour visuals and I saw all of the like black and white visuals, all of the purple lighting coming down and then the gold lighting shooting up, I was like, it's kind of giving that line from the song Daylight, which, like, if you know the lore, is obviously very relevant to Carrie and my connection, about, I used to think love was black and white, but it's golden. And so like what I was taking away from the visuals was that, yeah, like potentially where Carrie was coming from when she agreed to this marketing strategy, potentially before I'd even told her that I liked her, was that she was coming from this like place of like hurt, of being jaded from past relationships and really being under the impression that they could only end in hurt, which, she's talked about in a recent interview. And yeah, so she potentially agreed to the marketing strategy from a place of like, like, I like her, but I'm probably going to get hurt anyway. You know what I'm saying? And like, yeah, potentially coming from this jaded place of like, it's probably going to end, like, may as well have some, have some art about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, because, like, yeah, when I saw the visuals, I was like, it's very much giving that like, line from Daylight. I used to think love was black and white, but it's golden. And especially with the like purpley hues coming down as well, like it's kind of like the lighting to me seemed to be telling a story of like, you know, I had this black and white view of relationships. I was very jaded, and, you know, hurt and bruised and like maimed from my last relationship. So I came into like this connection essentially expecting to get hurt, and not expecting to experience like kind of golden love, which I think is like hence the line, you didn't get a chance to choose, which I've said to Carrie so many times. The amount of times I've said to her, like, you shouldn't have been making decisions about my life without me. Like, you shouldn't have been making choices for me. Like, that's what I think that line is referring to. I'm going to go through the song in more detail, but like, yeah, like I really think, yeah, like this song is about Carrie owning like the place that she was in and where she was coming from when she agreed to the marketing strategy, and that she was essentially coming to this like just with a very jaded view of love, a black and white view of love, like a very coming to this connection like really hurt, and like maybe being scared to be hurt again, scared to experience loss again. But yeah, like that's potentially where she was coming from when she agreed to this strategy. And when you think about the song like that, I just think the chorus makes way more sense, because like essentially what the chorus is about is like, you know, like essentially what she was doing in this situation when she agreed to it was she was trying to avoid getting hurt again by agreeing to a situation that, you know, inevitably ended up with her getting hurt, because, you know, like the stuff that she was agreeing to that I didn't choose and I didn't agree to, was creating a scenario where, you know, I think she thought that it was going to protect her from being hurt, but at the end of the day, like it kind of put me in the firing line and allowed me to get hurt to the point where I eventually dipped, which, you know, just created the end that she was so afraid of happening. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, I feel. And, you know, like I don't think she necessarily had a good excuse for, you know, creating that scenario. I think, yeah, like I think the excuse of like, well, you know, my label's asking me for a big gimmick that's bigger than the Becky's So Hot for Girl of My Dreams gimmick, and I've got to give them something, so I'm going to give them this like crush that I have on this girl, and like market an album about being secretly in love with her and too scared to talk about her, which I think was the original marketing strategy. Again, I will make a video about the whole marketing strategy stuff. If you subscribe, you'll be around for that, where I'll go into way more detail. But yeah, like back to my point, essentially, like I really think the chorus is about, yeah, like her being so afraid of the end that she agreed to a situation that inevitably caused that end anyway, because while she was trying to protect herself, she was putting me in the firing line, allowing me to get hurt to the point where, you know, eventually I dipped. Because, you know, I didn't get a chance to choose, and that was the only choice that was available to me. Like, I didn't choose to be in this situation. My only choice was to remove myself. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I think the marketing strategy to her might have felt like a pretty poor excuse for putting me in that situation, particularly once I dipped. Yeah, like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking that the chorus is about now. And then when it comes to the other clues in the song that the song is actually about me, the very first thing is the references to keeping people at a bird's eye view first and foremost. And that's because we actually have this whole lore about eagles. Because essentially what happened was Carrie went on a Instagram live around the time that she was getting diagnosed with Lyme, I think, and she mentioned that she happened to be seeing eagles more often of late. And then I voice memoed her and was like, oh, you know, funny you should mention eagles, because there's actually an eagle in the middle of my backyard that keeps our fish pond safe. And also, like, I just so happen to also have been seeing them a lot recently, but obviously I hadn't thought anything of it because it's not that uncommon to see them where I am. I haven't actually seen them in a while, so, you know, like maybe it is a little bit more uncommon than I originally thought, but yeah, at the time I'd been seeing like 2 eagles in particular a lot. So after she like mentioned it on the live, I started posting them a bit more. And then one day I happened to grab like a shirt out of my wardrobe, and like I looked down and I was like, oh, I actually have an eagle on this shirt. It's a Thrills Company shirt with like an eagle on it, and it also mentioned wild, and I was like, that's a little bit wild that, you know, I actually have a shirt with an eagle on it that mentions wild. And anyway, I posted that, and then literally like the next minute, not the next minute, but you know what I'm saying, like the next thing I see from Carrie is that she's found herself a Thrills Company cap that happens to have an eagle on it as well. And I was just like, what are the odds that she's like found something of the same brand with an eagle on it just after I've started posting like myself in a Thrills Company shirt with an eagle on it, you know what I'm saying? So there's lots of bird's eye view lore with us. So yeah, like originally when I heard the line, like that's what I immediately thought of, and I was just like, oh, she's probably just trying to sneak another Easter egg about me in there, because, you know, for most of the songs, like she'll like put at least one little thing about me in it. So like at the time I didn't really think that much of it. But like actually there's some more things in the song anyway, that I think also should have tipped me off that potentially the song was about me. Next line that's setting off my spidey senses is the one about keeping her safe, particularly because like Carrie's had this whole bit of like, you know, kind of comparing and contrasting like different muses through outfit choices. And she's like made one muse like white with like torn, maimed, burned kind of like apparel to like represent that muse. And then with me, she's like, particularly in the Lead Me On music video and any other time that she's trying to reference me and like on tour as well, she's worn like more protective, durable leather, kind of like biker aesthetic stuff. And so, yeah, like obviously she's already kind of like established that I'm this like safe healing kind of, yeah, like energy in her life based on, you know, like these costuming choices. And so I just think kind of can't be a coincidence that she's talking about someone keeping her safe, and then she's already made all of these references about kind of like who keeps her safe and who's like maimed her essentially. And yeah, like the showing up for her in ways they could never imagine. Like, you know, I think the circumstances like might be like restrictive enough that, you know, people would be like, how the friggity frack do y'all like kind of like show up for each other? You know what I'm saying? Like the situation itself, it's just like does make it a bit more mind boggling. You know what I'm saying? And also like, I'm going to be real with you. I have thought on occasion that it's probably good that I had a psych degree before I like went into this. Because yeah, like, I don't know how people would be able to handle being in this situation without like some expertise in the situation. You know what I'm saying? Like, because, you know, I think the situation as it stands is kind of like fundamentally unsafe when it comes to relationships. Like making two people that are like, have, you know, fallen in love and gotten very attached, not able to communicate is like an extremely dangerous, toxic situation to put them in, especially for money. Like, but yeah, like I'm glad that I like went into it, you know, just like extremely, extremely conscious of just like how toxic this situation, like the environment that we've been thrown into against my will, for sure is, so that I can try and show up as best possible in the circumstances. And, you know, I think that potentially could be what that line's referring to, that, you know, like I've somehow managed to show up for her despite like a fucking wild situation. And the outro pretty much just seems to be like an evolution on the chorus, in the sense that she's talking about, you know, being so worried about getting hurt that, you know, she's essentially sabotaged the situation. Like, because, you know, she was like afraid that this could be the one, which, you know, like I think the second we saw each other, like that was the feeling. Like if I'm really, really real with myself, like I had this like deep sense of calm and peace the second that, you know, she came out on stage to her show in August 2022, and I just had a feeling, you know what I'm saying? Like I was very much in denial about that feeling for a very long time, because like I was still kind of, you know, involved with someone at the time, So I was like very in denial about the feeling. But yeah, like I have not felt the same ever since. Like I walked out of that show like night and day different. And yeah, like I assume somewhere along the line, the same kind of thing happened for her, the same kind of feeling happened for her. I don't know if it was when she found me on TikTok in July, or if it was later, like when she sent me that first message in September. Like it could have been any time that potentially, she felt the same, like felt like this could be the one, this could be the perfect thing. But yeah, I think, it's understandable that even though we both had that feeling, and I think, potentially we're both like a little bit in denial about having that feeling, about having that kind of like sense of knowing. Like just given what she'd gone through in her previous connection, particularly what was like going down at the time that we met, like all the Becky So Hot drama she was like in the peak of it as we met. I understand why, her coming like with that, kind of very like real bruised, torn up, maimed energy. And this very like black and white, perspective that, she was just going to get hurt again in every relationship. Because, that was like her very real lived experience at the time, that she was like really, really like bruised and torn up and hurt, and kind of expecting to be hurt again. Like, I get why, like, she might have wanted to sabotage that. Like when she like ran into, when we crossed paths, that, she had this like, opportunity presented to her of like, hey, this is your out. We want you to not talk to this girl so that you can make an album about her. I totally get why she would have agreed to that at the time. Like, imagine like being in the peak of like, you're so like maimed from your last relationship, you're getting so torn up, and you're like in a place where you're just like so jaded of like, like once upon a time there was love here, but now all there is like pain. Like I can imagine that if, a multi-million-dollar company said, we want you to like not pursue this so that we can make money off it. Like, what else were you going to say? But yes, you know what I'm saying? Like, of course you're going to sabotage yourself. Like, what an opportunity to sabotage yourself. And I can see where she was coming from in terms of like wanting to agree to that at the time. And so, yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, I think that's really what this song is about. Like, it does just make a lot of sense, particularly in the timeline. I just think it fits a little bit too well now that I really think on it. It does seem like it's about, her like sabotaging this thing with her and I, because she was in a really hurt place at the time that we crossed paths, and she was, expecting to get, hurt, bruised again. She was expecting this love to be the same as all the others, which was, black and white. You experience a high and then you get hurt. But then this connection was different. This was actually the golden one. Turns out, she was sabotaging herself for no reason. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was kind of the vibe. Like, it does, now the song makes a lot more sense. I just think it's about what I think it's about. You know what I'm saying? Like, what else would it be about? Yeah, essentially, I think the song is set right when I was dipping, right when I was making the choice to remove myself, given that I hadn't made the choice to put myself in this situation to begin with. I think, it's basically told from the perspective of like Carrie, like looking back and realizing that because that was the situation, because I didn't choose to be in this situation and she chose it for me, to try and avoid getting hurt. She essentially like brought about how things ended, because, she was obviously kind of coming from a bit of a self-sabotaging place of like, I don't want to get hurt, so I'm going to agree to a, marketing strategy that allows me to avoid, what I would normally do next, and be like, hey, how you going? Like, let me take you to dinner. You know what I'm saying? Now I have an excuse not to do that. Even if it is a bad one, then like, I think essentially that's, what the song's about. It's about her reflecting on how she kind of got herself in this situation. And that it was a self-fulfilling prophecy anyway. It was just sabotage, and it, didn't save her from getting hurt. It just called in exactly what she was afraid of anyway. That's why I think this is track 7 and the first kind of song about this particular muse, myself, because, it's kind of like bridging the gap between, how this whole thing started in terms of like her agreeing to this marketing strategy, and then kind of like taking you right up to the point that, I ended up dipping, and then, creating the kind of like avalanche of like I'm sure a lot of self-reflection that led to, Lead Me On, Pretending, and Joyride then being written, as kind of the consequences of those actions kind of flowed on and turned into more feelings. I think that would make sense, why this would be track 7 and how that would be kind of like setting up the plot in terms of everything else that happened with us after we fought. Plus, in terms of weaving a storyline, I don't think it would make sense if the first song in the chronological timeline about me was Lead Me On, given that, Lead Me On is set in a very specific time in our connection after I dipped and when I'd started posting some of the synchronicities from the universe that I was seeing that were basically encouraging me to go back, were telling me not to run away from the situation, even though I was getting really hurt. I think it would make sense if there was a song before Lead Me On to kind of set up the premise of why I left. I think, I had my reasons for dipping, but, I think it would make sense if Carrie wrote a song from her perspective, owning her side of what she could see she did that kind of maybe enabled the situation and led to me dipping. You know what I'm saying? That would make sense to me. Chronologically, in terms of a storyline, I think it would make sense for her to set up the premise of I made some bad calls. I agreed to some things that I shouldn't have agreed to because I was afraid of getting hurt. And then you dipped, and now you're kind of looking like you might be around again. And I'm just desperate for you to keep doing what you're doing because, something's better than nothing. In terms of a storyline, I just think it would make sense if Lead Me On didn't happen out of the blue, and she was kind of setting up a storyline this way of owning kind of what she did to kind of enable the situation, even though it's not totally her fault. And I made decisions, multi-million-dollar companies made decisions, that situation was a lot of people enabling the situation. But I think in terms of the storyline, it would make sense if, she moved from owning, that I was coming from a hurt place, which is why I agreed to this situation, to, Lead Me On. I think that would make sense in terms of telling a richer story. And I think that Pretending was potentially written around the same time as Lead Me On. However, I do think Lead Me On marks probably the darkest time for Carrie in this whole process. When I listen to the record, in particular the second half of the album, that seems to be more about me, I can kind of pick Lead Me On as kind of maybe the most agonized song about me, and it seems like it was written right in the peak point of dark, right in the peak point of maybe being worried that it was over. But I think Pretending was potentially written it around the same time, and I think it was potentially written from, the side of Carrie that probably never lost hope. I think I know for me, there was always part of me that even in my darkest despairs, there was some part of me that, kind of knew we were it, and was just I can't see the forest from the trees right now in this physical reality that we're in, and the 3D situation is so complex and so hard that I cannot in my cognitive brain understand how we're going to make it out of this, but I cannot shake the feeling that we will. You know what I'm saying? There was lots of moments like that for me. Not lots, a few moments like that for me. There was a few dark moments where, even in the moment where I was maybe full of a bit of agony and despair, there was some sort of light within me that couldn't turn off in terms of thinking that we were going to make it and we are going to, end up together. Even in moments where I was like, this situation seems so impossibly hard and so impossibly, so impossible to escape without, severe damage. Like, I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this alive. You know what I'm saying? But there was some, part of me that was, kind of trusting the situation and, trusting our connection to make it through the situation. You know what I'm saying? Like, I trusted that the situation would never do enough damage to hurt what we had, because I knew that what we had was stronger than any situation, even a fucking crazy one like the one we've been in. I think Pretending was written from the hopeful part of her that wouldn't die, even in that potentially dark agonizing moment that she wrote Lead Me On, and she potentially had her own kind of fears and insecurities coming up, because I do think there's some stuff there for her in terms of the feminine feeling hard to reach, and distant and unavailable. I think even in those dark moments where she was facing her own stuff, and writing Lead Me On, facing her own fears of not being able to lock the feminine down, and I think it was written in a bit of an insecure, I'm not good enough place, Lead Me On, to be honest. But I think Pretending was potentially written from the hopeful side of herself, that even in that situation, even in her confronting all of her own darkness, all of her own stories around the feminine maybe being a bit hard to reach, a bit unavailable, there was some hopeful part of her that kind of knew that it would be her and I, or at least hoped that it would be her and I, and a part of her that even in all that darkness didn't die. I think that potentially was where she was kind of writing the song from. And I think that's I can kind of feel that in the song, that there's her hopeful side of herself kind of channeled that energy into a song. I do think she took some creative liberties in terms of the plot of the song, which is, why it didn't immediately jump out to me as about me. But then after the music video, I obviously changed my mind when I saw, how many references to me were in the video, and to a muse that felt wild and felt free and, represented freedom. Because obviously there's lots of butterfly symbolism and lots of wild horse symbolism, which it does is also what makes me think that it was written around the time of Lead Me On. It just seems like those two songs are buddies, except written from, one song, Lead Me On, written from the part of Carrie that was in a dark place and kind of going through all her own shit, and all her own fears of not being able to, close the gap she feels between her and the feminine. Feels like the feminine's always, hard to reach. But then also simultaneously being in a place that's hopeful and thinks that this thing's going to actually work out this time. I think there's lots of symbolism in the music video that would suggest that those two songs were written around the same time from two different sides of herself in the same kind of situation. But I do think, she definitely took some creative liberties with the plot, but I think I know kind of what her intention was when it came to the plot. I'm pretty sure the way she was tackling the plot was trying to set up a narrative that represents sapphic yearning. And the reason why I think that was her intention, other than, the song is just the plot is giving sapphic yearning. You listen to the plot and you're this is what it's like to be a yearning sapphic. You know what I'm saying? But the other reason other than that as to why I think she wanted the song to very much be giving sapphic yearning was because one of the last things that I would have said to her before I dipped was I was talking about reading Call Me By Your Name, because I was reading Call Me By Your Name around the time that, just before everything kicked off with us. And I remember being in her DMs talking about how one of the reasons why I loved the book was that I thought it captured yearning so well. And I was it may as well be a sapphic book for all I care, because I just feel like it encapsulates all the sapphic yearning I've ever felt in my life. You know what I'm saying? I think it does the story did such a good job of bringing like my own sapphic yearning to life, even though the story is obviously about two men. And yeah, like now when I think about that and then also think about the plot of the song Pretending, I'm like, I feel like Pretending is very much giving a plot about sapphic yearning. You know what I'm saying? And like, you know, I think even though that, you know, she's kind of like potentially made up the like the plot a little bit, like kind of made up a story that kind of conveys that sapphic yearning. I think at the same time she's definitely borrowed things like inspo from like what was going on in our connection, but maybe just like turning it into like a more literal plot. And I think what was happening with us was maybe a little bit less literal. Because I remember around this time, like when I stopped kind of posting about her on TikTok, I was like posting stuff. Like I remember posting about the movie Tar that had just come out on Netflix. And yeah, like I remember like posting stuff like that about kind of just stuff that was like going on. Like I kind of stopped posting about Carrie and I was just talking about, you know, kind of mundane, boring stuff that's going on in the world on my account. And yeah, so I think that might have been the genesis of the first verse. Like I think she kind of like fleshed it out into more of a plot as if it was actually happening. But yeah, I think potentially that's like where she was coming from, like that frustration that I kind of was, you know, kind of like talking about normal life things and not talking about her anymore. And yeah, like, but I think there was like some subtle, things that were about her, even though I wasn't talking about her, you know what I'm saying? Like in that Tar video, I remember talking about how, like Kate Blanchett as Tar, like goes up to a kid in school and it's just like, I'm Petra's father. And I was just like, that was hot. Like, yeah, I feel like she was like very much giving similar energy to Carrie in that moment. And so like, even though I was like talking about other things, kind of, I think you could interpret it as also like maybe subtly talking about Carrie, even though I wasn't talking about Carrie, which, you know, like I can see that. I can see how that might be a thing. And I can see how, you know, Carrie might have taken like what I was doing online at the time and like turned it into more of a plot and turned it into as if I'd literally made a joke about kissing her instead of, you know, making a joke about, you know, Tar being hot in that moment in that movie. You know what I'm saying? Like I kind of see where she like might have taken some inspo from. I can see how she might have taken something like very subtle like that and turned it into something that reflected sapphic yearning more kind of overtly to kind of like make sure she was like capturing the essence of what she wanted the song to be in the first verse, so that you like listen to the song and immediately know that you're supposed to be in your sapphic yearning feels like when you're listening to it. Then what she did with the second verse is I think she potentially like turned like what we were going through in our situation again into something a little bit more literal, as if it was happening in the 3D. Particularly with this line about like, I see it now, you're everything, turn back around and never leave. Like, I imagine that's like what she thought when I dipped. And yeah, like the other thing that makes me think that, you know, this line is about me and how she felt when I dipped was because obviously in the song Lead Me On, as part of the opening sequence, you can see this skater like circle around Carrie and then leave, and she's literally just watching her. She just watches this skater like spin around her and then leave. And yeah, I think that was like maybe foreshadowing this line in Pretending and maybe trying to link Pretending and Lead Me On together again to again allude to the fact that these songs were written around the same time, but from two different perspectives. And yeah, Pretending was, yeah, like more maybe an ownership of her yearning and her hope that, you know, we would work it out. And also I do think the line, you know, turn back around and never leave, as if that's the text I'm sending, also kind of alludes to our situation where, you know, even if she wanted to say that to me in that moment where I dipped, obviously she couldn't, like, and so then that would make the line as if that's the text I'm sending just like a little bit funnier, you know what I'm saying? Because like, as if she could say what she wanted to say in that moment, like she literally couldn't. Essentially, I can see how like these lines, I see it now, you're everything, turn back around and never leave, as if that's the text I'm sending, potentially was very real for her in that moment. Like I can see how that might have been, you know, like exactly where she was at the time of like, you know, me dipping and, you know, her having this hope, and like, you know, wanting to reach out at the time, even though she couldn't, obviously. But yeah, then I think the rest of the verse, like surrounding those lines, was kind of like fleshed out into like more of a storyline, in order to, paint more of a story and make the song sound like it's sapphic yearning. And I also think that's why the music video didn't just act out the story, because I think the story wasn't all that relevant. I think what Carrie wanted to capture was the essence of the yearning at the time. And I think, you know, when she did make the music video, again, like the focus was on the yearning. And I think, you know, when it came to the music video, I would say that the focus was on the yearning for having a life with that person. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think, you know, the song, Pretending is like maybe more about like yearning and wanting to end up with someone. But then I think the music video was more like created more, like fleshed out more of a narrative around like, it's not just about wanting to end up with that person though. It's like actually wanting to build a life with them. It's like wanting to do all the like mundane shit, like watch TV, brush your teeth, like make coffee in the morning. You know what I'm saying? Like that's really, to me, that's what it feels like the music video helped to like flesh out when it came to the Pretending song. Like I think the song in itself did so well of like capturing sapphic yearning, but I feel like the way Carrie decided to turn that into something visual seemed to me like she was trying to flesh it out, and make it seem like not only is there yearning to like end up with this person, but there's also a yearning for like, you know, actually having a life with this person. And so, I think the song's like all, very deep, like when you take all the bits and pieces into consideration, and like put it all together, like, I think she did a good job of like fleshing that out over multiple mediums to kind of like create a sensation, a feeling that's supposed to be attached to this song. I think it's because of how well she's fleshed out the song and the feelings that she's trying to convey that it's helping me kind of like place the song in terms of timeline, because, you know, like I think, you know, like our experiences seem to be similar. Like I think even in my darkest time, which was Errors of Us, like there was some part of me that like still kind of like hoped or felt that, you know, like we were gonna like be okay, and that it was gonna be us. And I think, you know, Pretending seems to be conveying a feeling that, you know, I think even if Carrie wasn't having it in the forefront of her mind, like even if the forefront of her mind was like consumed with kind of like, let's say more lead me on kind of themes in terms of like being worried that, you know, she was never going to be able to catch up with me. Like I think in the back of her mind, there must have been some sort of like, you know, hope that we would work out and some sort of like yearning for that reality that, you know, the back of her mind thought was like, you know, still possible, even though, you know, the reality of the situation reality at the time, the 3D situation did not look good. There's been so many times where the 3D reality has not looked fucking good for either of us, I think. But I think, I know I've had like some sort of like deep inner knowing that even in my darkest times hasn't shut up. And I can kind of, to me, it kind of feels like that maybe Pretending and Lead Me On are like painting that picture for her. Like, I think potentially even when she was in all of those feely feels, all of the like agonized energy that I think is in Lead Me On of like kind of like, you know, yearning for someone in more of a, like coming from a bit more of a, like wounded inner child place maybe. Yeah, I think there was also like a more evolved part of herself in the back of her mind being like, I think it's going to be us, you know what I'm saying? Like, and yearning for more of a, like, I think you're my person and I think I'm your person. And like yearning from that different place, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think because she's done such a good job of like fleshing out the feelings that I'm having a better time like placing them chronologically in the timeline. Especially because, like I think we've been through some similar stuff. And so, like I'm finding the way that she's conveying feelings very relatable because I've fucking been there, you know what I'm saying? Like I've been feeling similar things in this situation that she has, I think. I think that's why pretending is track 9, because obviously there's this whole lore with us in terms of like different numbers meaning different things in different kinds of relationships, and the number 9 being associated with the kinds of relationships that are like healing and forever. They're the soulmate relationships. And so I think Carrie very intentionally put pretending as track 9 to convey that, like pretending is supposed to be conveying like a quiet confidence in the back of your mind that, you're going to end up with this person, like as if this person hasn't been what you've been waiting for this whole time. Like, of course it's going to be you and them. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's very intentional that pretending is track 9. If you're not familiar with that law, I will insert a clip of me explaining it in a moment, just so we're all across how important the number 9 is to this connection and why it's so significant that Carrie put this track as track 9. So for anyone not familiar, the 369 combo is considered exceptionally powerful in numerology. And back in July, I went on a massive rant in Carrie's DMs about the significance of 3, 6, and 9 in relationships. But I literally yapped for almost 13 minutes, so I'm just going to play you a teeny tiny clip and then summarize what I said to her.
I've always had the opinion that we have 3 relationships. Like we have we have 3s, we have 6s, and we have 9s. We have those 3 kinds of relationships.
Essentially what I went on to say is that relationships can be divided into 3s, 6s, and 9s based on what those numbers represent in numerology. Our 3 relationships, which we tend to have more of early on, are essentially karmic in nature, where we convert our childhood karma into relationship karma. Our 6 relationships are often shadow mates and twin flames, because 6 in numerology is often associated both with the devil but also forms of beauty, such as having a mirror held up to you to show you all of your wounds in order for you to heal them. So often it's our 6 relationships that wake us up. Our 9 relationships are our soulmates because it's a number associated with completion and healing. Essentially, the 6 and 9 relationships mirror each other, similarly to the way that actual numbers mirror each other, in the sense that the 6 relationships are designed for spiritual awakening, and as a consequence you experience romantic love, whereas the 9 relationships are designed for romantic love, and as a consequence you experience spiritual enlightenment. And some people will experience a 3-stage, a 6-stage, and a 9-stage in a single relationship, whereas other people will need to be in relationships with at least 3 separate people in order to experience a 3 relationship, a 6 relationship, and a 9 relationship. And in that voice memo, I spoke to Carrie about feeling like I was her 9.
Yeah, I find it interesting that you have 9 tattooed to yourself, because I think that would have called me in as well if I'm your 9, which I think I am.
To be honest, in hindsight, I think I should have known that the numerology law was too important to us for her to have made track 9 about anyone else but me. Like, obviously she was going to make track 9 about me, and that was just a little bit silly goofy of me to have thought otherwise. And yeah, it was a little bit, silly goofy of me to have needed the whole pretending music video to like start to get it. And yeah, which I definitely recommend going and watching, because there's so much like finding rewilding lore in that video. And also like, yeah, needing all the lighting cues for her playing pretending on stage, which obviously like the lighting cues on tour is all like pink and yellow, which, is obviously very like on Wednesdays we wear pink and like golden coated. Plus, when she performed at the Kelly Clarkson show, most of the lighting cues were golden green, which, if you've watched the Pretending music video reaction, like that's also significant, both in our connection and to my literal country, given that Australia's national colours are green and gold. yeah, I should have put two and two together, but I didn't. But now that all the clues are cluing, like it's very obvious that Pretending is supposed to be a story about sapphic yearning. And even if she kind of like made up the plot a little bit, made the plot, pulled the plot out of her imagination more so than anything else, which she has alluded to in interviews that, she does do that. She does like make up full fucking scenarios in her head because like what else would a Pisces do? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I should have realized sooner, but I didn't. But now I do. Now I know. Now I know that, yeah, Pretending is essentially, yeah, like her making up a storyline, but it's supposed to be representing, yeah, sapphic yearning. And yeah, even if the plot is made up, obviously the song is supposed to be about me. And I should have realized, but I didn't, but now I do. But speaking of numerology, that brings us to Joyride, which upon further reflection definitely has some numerology references in the verses that I literally don't know how I missed the first time, given like how important like the numerology lore is to our connection. It took me a few listens before I realized that in the first verse, Carrie mentions 6 hours, and in the second verse, she references 9 twice. She references it once in 90 and then 45. So 4 plus 5 obviously equals 9 as well. So obviously I was right in my like initial reaction video where I said that I think she's changed muses halfway through the song. But the thing that I didn't realize at the time was that she was telling me who the muses were the whole time and I just missed it. The first muse is obviously her 6th relationship, her, shadow mate or twin flame or, however they identify to each other, which is Shannon. And then the second muse is obviously her soulmate, her forever person, her like healing relationship. And yeah, like she let me know that from the 90 and a 45 and somehow I just completely missed that. And you know what? Upon reflection, I should have realized that the song was going to be about me just based on the title alone, because we do have a lot of car lore, to be honest. Like I think it like properly started in my second video in this kind of like YouTube Fletchiverse series, the Forbidden Lovers video, because towards the end of that video I was talking about how, the situation as it stood should have been very breaks on with us. Like I was like, literally nothing should have happened, but somehow everything happened. Somehow we've gone really fucking far and we're in really fucking deep right now. And so that's when I first kind of like, I think officially like brought it into the Finding Rewilding universe. And then it kind of like became a bit of a thing after that, because obviously when I dipped, I made a playlist that I titled Crash, and I had an image of 2 cars crashing in black and white as the playlist cover. And yeah, that was me being a bit dramatic about, me getting really upset about things. And then after that, obviously we like stopped communicating for a little while, and then Carrie started to leave hints that she'd left her label. And so then I was like maybe warming up to her a little bit. And then, I was posting a few things of like the universe kind of like, kind of encouraging me to go back after that happened, after, she'd like negotiated her way out of her contract. And then I started seeing signs to like go back essentially. And one of the signs that I saw was I was reading a book that just so happened to be titled She Drives Me Crazy. And towards the very end of the book, the main character has her birthday, and her birthday happens to be in March. She happens to be a Pisces, and she happened to, like, for her birthday, what she decided to do was go to the cinema to watch 16 Candles, which just so happened to be what Carrie did for her birthday last year in 2023. And I was reading this in September, I think, and Carrie had done that for her birthday in March. And so I was literally reading it being like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. Like, what are the chances? And so I ended up posting that I was reading the book, and that's what I saw in it. And then, yeah, obviously when Carrie saw that, she then posted a picture to Twitter which was the only social media that I didn't have her muted on, I think, at the time. And she had captioned the photo with a quote from the song Speed Drive by Charlie XCX, which had been kind of like a little bit our song for like a little while right before I dipped. Because, you know, it came out and I like DM'd her and told her that I fucking loved it. And I was like dancing around to it all day. Around the same time that she played a festival where she looked really fucking hot. And so I used that song on a lot of the videos that I was making at the time about her. And yeah, so obviously her captioning the photo with a quote from that song that had been on like my playlist since it dropped and her playlist since it dropped, because, you know, like we're both kind of vibing to it at the same time. Was, you know, like very intentional. Was obviously supposed to reference what I'd said the previous day about, you know, me reading that book, She Drives Me Crazy, and it having like a synchronicity to do with her in it. And I really think that, to be honest, I think Carrie thought that I'd, you know, be fine with that. And I'd, you know, think it was cute. And not that I didn't think it was cute at all. Like obviously I got what she was referencing and got that she was like trying to do what we would normally do on the internet, which is like I post something and then the next day I wake up and she's, you know, posted something to reference whatever it was that I posted. That's like very normal for us. Like that's very, you know, like classic Finding Rewilding kind of lore. But at the time I was still like, there was still a few other things other than, you know, like her label that was like still an issue for me. Like I still didn't feel particularly seen and heard. And yeah, like I still really needed to hear how she felt about me and not just have these kind of like very subtle back and forths on the internet. I was like, this isn't giving me what I need. So I was pretty upset. And I did make a video saying that I was still upset and that I needed other things. And then, you know, I did add another song by Charlie XCX onto my playlist, onto my Crash playlist at the time, like titled Crash, basically because I was like, no, I'm still like, it's slightly better, but I'm still in a pretty crash place. Like there's still other things that I need, even though you've like solved most of the problem. I understand that you fixed most of the problem and I feel a lot better about a lot of things now, but like, it's not like completely solved. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that was like the crux of us, you know, the big fight that we had during Venus retrograde last year. That was kind of like the crux of what started it. Essentially, I don't think we were seeing very eye to eye at the time, but also at the time, I don't think I was seeing that we weren't seeing eye to eye. You know what I'm saying? Like, because at the time, like, I think she was a little bit in boy brain energy where, you know, I think from where she was standing, she was like, well, I've fixed most of the problem. Most of the problem is coming from the fact that this multi-million-dollar company stood to make a buck and now they are no longer going to be an issue. So we should go back to normal. Like, I think in her head, she was like, well, it's fixed. You know what I'm saying? Like the problem's fixed. But, you know, because I tend to be a little bit girly about shit, I was actually less worried about the problem getting solved and more worried about being seen, heard, and validated in my feelings about the situation. And also it wasn't just like, it wasn't just that I was upset about this multi-million-dollar company, like trying to exploit our connection to make a buck. Like it was also that, you know, like because that was the situation, then there was all of these other problems that kind of springing up because of that situation too. You know what I'm saying? Like I was getting hurt and I felt like I needed an apology. At this point, I had never heard her say words out of her mouth explicitly about how she felt about me, even though, you know, I'd said that I really needed that in October the previous year. And so, yeah, like it was, for me, it was like that, well, there's other smaller issues that have sprung up because of that main issue. And then also like, I'm now feeling away because of like the big issue, but also all these little issues. And I need to feel seen, heard, and validated in that. And at the time, like, I didn't understand that that's how her brain works. Like, I didn't understand that she thinks a little bit more like a boy. And so, like, at the time, I was so, like, I was getting even more upset because I was, like, I was like expecting her to react to me being upset in a feminine way and like go into see, hear, and validate. And when she didn't, I was like, in my head, I was like, that must mean she doesn't care about me. You know what I'm saying? She doesn't love me the way I love her, because in my girly brain, I was like, well, that's what I would automatically do if I loved someone. You know what I'm saying? But I just didn't take into consideration that, you know, we had very different brains, and it didn't even occur to me that we had very different brains until kind of the same issue essentially popped up again during the Errors of Us time in December. And once it kind of came up again, I was like, oh, I think she thinks differently. So essentially, that fight turned into a much, much, much bigger fight, mostly because I was like really expecting her to respond to me in a feminine way because, you know, obviously you see a pretty girl and you just assume that, you know, there's going to be some feminine energy there, which is crazy because I know like that a big part of the reason why I'm attracted to her is because I can feel a lot of masculine energy in her. So I don't know how it didn't occur to me. Like looking back at it, I'm like, it's so obvious that that's what was happening, that she was kind of like in that more masculine energy and like heard me have a problem and fix the problem and thought that that would solve everything. And yeah, like obviously at the time, I don't think she was realizing that I just needed to be seen, heard, and validated in my feelings more so than anything else. Like, if you want to fix the problem for me, like knock yourself out. I'm never going to stop you from trying to fix my problems if you can see a solution. And I think it's so sweet that you do that. But yeah, like I was definitely not in a very secure place and I needed to be seen, heard, and validated more than anything else in that moment. And, you know, when she didn't do that for me, like because I was expecting her to respond to me in a feminine way, then I just started like getting even more insecure and spiraling even more because then I started telling myself all these stories about, you know, like if she cared about me, that's what she would do because that's what I would do as someone in a lot of feminine energy. So yeah, I was definitely projecting that onto her and like expecting her to respond in a feminine way and assuming that because she didn't, it was because she didn't care rather than, you know, considering the possibility that the reason why she didn't respond to me in a feminine way was because she's very much in her masculine energy. Like, I don't know. The things that happen inside your head when you're not in a very secure place, it does get a bit wild in there. Like, obviously you don't think rationally at the time, you think very emotionally, and that's obviously where I was coming from. I was definitely very much in my emotional brain at the time, taking everything so goddamn personally and getting so butthurt and like getting so much more hurt than I already was because of the stories that I was telling myself about, you know, how she, like what she was doing and what I was making that mean. So anyway, that was a really, really long story short. We had a really, really big fight that like centered around this kind of like car law essentially. And, you know, like obviously she was going to want to write a song about that. Like that was a pretty big fight and there was a lot of car law like right at the center of that fight. So obviously she was going to write a song about it and put, you know, car law in the middle of the song. You know what I'm saying? Like obviously the song centered around like cars and driving, just the way our fight was. So that's obviously what the song is about and obviously when the song is supposed to be set, like when we're having this fight, using like fucking car law to like fight with each other essentially. And, you know, like based on me now knowing that that's the situation and that's when this song is supposed to be set, this song is supposed to be set as we're having that fight. So around the same time that Lead Me On and Pretending were also set. I'm going to be real with you. Now the song makes so much more sense. It makes so much more sense, like what the song's actually about. Because yeah, like obviously like around the time that we were having this fight, it was basically a year exactly almost to the day that Carrie was having a very similar fight with Shannon on the internet where, you know, I think Carrie thought that like Shannon was going to be upset and then kind of get over it. And that, you know, like her attempts to repair were going to make it better because, yeah, obviously Carrie did try to like make things better with her at the time. And then, you know, like a year later, she's in a very similar situation with me where I'm getting really upset about stuff and, you know, she's tried to fix it, but I haven't responded to her fixing it super well either. So I can imagine that, you know, at the time, that didn't go down super well with her and she might have been like I now like listening to the song, I think, you know, she potentially responded to that situation kind of blaming herself and thinking that she was, you know, crazy and didn't deserve either of us or anything like that. Rather than, you know, kind of thinking that maybe there was like just a miscommunication error and that, you know, maybe Shannon and I think a little bit differently than the way she thinks, hence the fight. And you know what? It kills me how quick in a heated moment that, you know, is not her fault. It's like totally just a two people not seeing eye to eye thing. She go like in her head, she goes to a place of like basically what the chorus is talking about, like, she's out of my league. I don't deserve her. I'm crazy. I'm out of my mind. I'm sabotaging this. I don't deserve her. I'm not good enough for like a relationship. I'm only good for a like casual fling. These girls steal my heart, but you know, like I'm never going to be able to lock it down kind of thing. I'm never going to be able to like do what I have to do to like actually be able to like keep them. Like that, to think that's where her brain goes, you know, because of a moment of miscommunication and like not seeing eye to eye and like needing to, you know, change your perspective and look at a situation a different way to like, you know, understand why you're not seeing eye to eye. Like, yeah, it kills me how quick she kind of like spirals to like basically where she ended up in the chorus. So yeah, that's like hard to hear. But yeah, that's essentially what I think the chorus is about now that I have some more context of like when the song was set and like what was going on in our connection that kind of made her write this song. Yeah, I think, you know, in that moment, like based on what was going on, yeah, I think she was like maybe coming to this song in a bit of like a I'm not good enough place and like I must be crazy, especially because I think, you know, Shannon and I had responded kind of in a pretty similar way to her. Like obviously, you know, I understand where she was coming from in thinking like I must be the problem, like if you're having a repeated issue. But it's not because, you know, actually there's something wrong with you. It's because you just have boy brain. And I think Shannon and I both think a little bit more like girls, to be honest. I think we think a little bit more similarly. And yeah, I think both of us were probably just really wanting to be seen and heard. And neither of us feeling like that. And feeling like, you know, I know, like, I don't want to speak for her, but, you know, I know for me, I was like kind of feeling like she was, yeah, not acknowledging where I was at and how I felt. And yeah, that was most of the reason why I wasn't responding to her super well when, you know, she was trying to move past it. But yeah, anyway, I think the now we're both going down, shooting stars out of the sky is like basically her blaming herself, being like, yeah, this is all my fault. Like, because like I'm going for girls out of my league and I'm, you know, crazy. Now, like this thing that I really wanted to happen's going down. And yeah, like, yeah, I think there's a lot of self-blame in that I can hear. But, you know, the thing that I do kind of like is that in the next line, I'd originally been taking this as like her maybe being a little bit avoidant, but actually think now upon a second listen that actually she's hopeful in the next line because, you know, she's asking someone to try, essentially. No, I'm gonna try not to cry because I can feel it coming. Yeah, I think the third line is basically like, you know, like because of I have all these fears that I'm going to fuck everything up and that I'm crazy and these girls are out of my league and all I can do is like kind of sabotage things. I'm like distancing myself from these like connections. Like I'm pulling away because I'm blaming myself, but I really want someone to try. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's what that line actually means, especially the double dare you to try. Like, a double dare is like you both do something. So I think, yeah, the line is supposed to mean like I'm pulling away because I'm blaming myself, but like I want to try. I just need to know that you'll do it with me. You know what I'm saying? Like I need us both to be in it. I need us both to be trying because I feel like I'm fucking killing myself trying and it's not good enough. You know what I'm saying? Like actually really hopeful of like maybe one day, yeah, someone will like try with me. And I hope that, you know, by me eventually getting to a place where I figured out where the miscommunication was and where the disconnect was and that, you know, like I think it's pretty obvious that you can't get to a place like that if you're blaming the other person. Like if you're making someone else like the bad guy in your head, like it is very hard to get from there to a place of like, oh, this is how we're not understanding each other right now. Like I hope the fact that I eventually got to a place where I, you know, was kind of seeing like where she was coming from a lot better. And, you know, understanding that she's definitely not crazy. She just thinks different. Like, yeah, I hope she felt that from me. Yeah, when I, you know, didn't blame her for things. even though she was obviously blaming herself enough for the both of us, I think, to be fair. Like, I really think she was, like, taking shit way too personal. Not that I wasn't taking shit personal, like, I was taking so much shit personal. So, like, obviously she was going to be taking shit personal too, that just, like, was not personal. But yeah, like, I hope, yeah, that was, yeah, what she hoped for. Like, I hope her getting that from me was, like, yeah, what she was hoping for, which I think it was. Just if I'm interpreting this chorus the way that I think that it's supposed to be interpreted, you know, I hope that's how she took what happened after this. Like, if this song was set when I think it's set, which is in the peak of our fight, like, I hope based on, you know, how that fight eventually resolved, yeah, I hope, yeah, the resolution felt healing for her in terms of, yeah, like, kind of where she went mentally after that fight, which, you know, I think she kind of spelled out pretty clearly in the chorus. Yeah, I think essentially, like, I think eventually the fight obviously resolved itself. Like, I got what I need, and, you know, I think I also eventually was able to figure out, you know, how to communicate to her, like, why, like, that fight was so much worse, that, you know, it was because I was not feeling seen, heard, and validated. So yeah, I hope, like, that based on how that fight resolved, that, you know, I got what I needed. And, you know, I was also able to make it clear to her, like, what it was that I needed, and that, you know, like, it wasn't her fault that she was, you know, assuming that I needed something else, because her brain obviously works different. So obviously she's going to assume that I need what she would need, or what, you know, like, her brain automatically wants to do in a situation like that. Yeah, I hope she found, like, how that fight resolved healing. Because, you know, like, obviously with the last two lines, it's very clear that, you know, like, it seems like she's seeking, like, some sort of, you know, resolution, some sort of, like, healing in the situation. Like, you know, double dare you to try to steal the keys to my heart, take it out for a joyride. She's, like, asking, like, very much in those last two lines, she's very much asking someone to try, asking someone to steal her heart, asking someone to, like, you know, be in it with her. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I hope, like, based on how everything resolved, that it feels, like, healed and resolved for her. Because, yeah, I hope she feels, yeah, like, seen in, like, her good intentions that were just coming from a different kind of energy than where I was coming from, and that it was just, yeah, like, miscommunication, and misunderstanding each other, not seeing eye to eye, just because we are different, in the way that we approach things. And yeah, like, I do think, like, based on how she ends the chorus with the steal the keys to my heart, take it out for a joyride, like, I do think that there is some sort of, like, inner knowing that I was gonna, you know, provide that healing for her, based on the fact that, like, in January last year, I wrote this poem, I'm riding shotgun in your car, passenger princess of your heart. I think that's what that line is supposed to reference. Like, yeah, I think the last line reflects that there's some sort of inner knowing within her that it is going to be me, that, like, is able to provide that healing, and is going to be the one who tries and the one who actually gets it right, to make her, you know, feel better, feel more healed, feel like shit's not her fault, and maybe her brain just works different, and that she can do this. I just think, like, based on how I'm interpreting the chorus, like, I think that's what she's looking for, in the song. Like, I think she's looking for, yeah, someone to make her feel like she can do this, and that she's not a fuck up, and that she's not out of her mind, and these girls aren't out of her league, and she's not, like, gonna sabotage things, and she's not only good for a joyride, like, she can actually, like, do this. Like, that's what it seems like the chorus is, like, kind of, like, wishing for, hoping for. Yeah, like, I do feel like now, like, I'm kind of hearing the song with a lot more hope. And, like, yeah, like, kind of, I think, yeah, just, like, wanting someone to, like, try, and, yeah, like, I think try and see where she's coming from too, and try and see that, you know, she's not crazy, and that, you know, she's not trying to sabotage shit, and that she's, you know, not, like, distancing herself from a place of, like, not wanting something. It's coming from a place of, like, fear that she's going to fuck it all up. Now I'm trying not to cry again. Yeah, like, I do think the song's more hopeful than I thought. And yeah, like, I think that last line, the way that it kind of reflects on a poem that I'd written early last year, like, I do think a lot of the source of the hope is hoping that, I was going to be that person for her, which, I hope based on how everything resolved that, yeah, she does feel like that's the case. But anyway, I'm going to move on because if I keep talking about it, I'm just going to fucking cry, because it upsets me that, this is where she goes in her head. And like, I don't blame her. Like, I think, based on what I've gathered about her life experience, I think it's totally fair for her to like think these things about herself. Like, I think anyone in her situation probably would. But still, it hurts my heart to know that this is where she's going. And it hurts my heart even more to know that, like when she was going there, like I couldn't be there for her, Now, I've tried not to cry. But yeah, like that she was in this place and I was not there for her. You know what I'm saying? Like, I couldn't talk to her. I couldn't like hold her. I couldn't like do any of the things. That's hard. But anyway, I'm going to move on because or else I'm going to start pulling my eyes out. So I'm going to start, let's interpret some of the verses because, yeah, that'll be a lot better than sitting here watching me cry. So obviously now I think the point of having two verses and having two different muses for each of the verses, and for the first verse to be the 6 muse and for the second verse to be the 9 muse, is because obviously like this song seems to be about the fights that she had with me and Shannon about the same time, mid 2023 and mid 2022, that were like just very similar. There was a lot of overlap. There was a lot of like, I'm sure the situation with me must have been very triggering based on the fact that she'd been through the same thing with Shannon the year previous. And so now knowing that context, like it makes so much more sense why both these muses are in the one song. Because yeah, I think she was potentially going through similar feelings with both muses. And yeah, like I think she potentially had a very similar reaction to each of us, not responding to her super well, in the midst of those fights. Cause obviously we were both, I think coming from a similar place in terms of like not feeling seen and heard. And yeah, I don't think she was like seeing how that, wasn't her fault. That was just, yeah, like not how her brain responds to things. So yeah, like I get that now. At the start, I was like, I don't really see the point of like having two different muses in the song. Like, I think she could have just like written the whole song from one muse, but now I understand that it's because, yeah, she had very similar fights with both of us, pretty much the exact same time over 2 years. And that, my fight with her was probably triggering her because of her fight with Shannon. And so, yeah, probably like the situation with her and I potentially was like way more intense because she'd been through it before. And I think that's the point of having the two verses with two muses. I think it's more to illustrate that she's had the same problem before, and that's why it's so heightened, because, yeah, it feels like a pattern for her, that, she's maybe not understanding. I think based on, kind of how the song pans out, she's kind of seems like she's still sitting in a lot of self-blame. I wouldn't say that this song is like kind of like realized. Yeah, I think this song's more about having the catharsis of like how she was feeling based on both of those fights, and based on having a very similar fight with, someone that she cares about, that just was very similar, across the board with both people. Yeah, I think this is more about like kind of getting her feelings out, to do with how she responded to both of those fights. Essentially, I think the point of like structuring the song this way was like first to get the feelings out, but then also to like, maybe find a place of hope that things were going to resolve a little bit differently and better eventually, like hopefully with this, second muse in the second verse. Anyway, now that we know that the second verse is about me, the second verse is actually making a lot more sense because like I wasn't really understanding like what all the lines meant. Like it just seemed like lots of things kind of like all just put in there before, and I was just like, this is like a string of like random stuff basically. But now I'm like, oh, I'm like connecting the dots of like what everything means. Because the first line, nowadays balance can be hard to find. I think this is actually a astrology reference, which I should have seen earlier, given that she like put a line about shooting stars out of the sky in the chorus. Like obviously she has gonna have some astrology references in the song. But the sign of balance is Libra, and Libra is the sign of balance because it's a sign associated with partnerships. So nowadays, balance can be hard to find is a line that's about looking for a partner, looking for that person who balances you out, that person who, you know, I think based on, you know, like what she's talking about in the chorus, like that person who makes you feel like they're not out of your league, you're not out of your mind, you're not like a fuck up, you're not going to sabotage it. And yeah, like they'll like see you in all your like fears around relationships, and, you know, try. And yeah, like love you anyway. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's what the first line of the second verse is, like trying to find that person that, you know, can balance you out and not make you crazy in your head, essentially, not make you think things that, like, yeah, like coming from a place of fear rather than coming from a place of love. And I think the next line, who knew I'd meet somebody with a mind as perverted as mine, is basically supposed to like imply that we have really good sexual chemistry. And yeah, like I think the next line of like, you don't have to be for the rest of my life, take it out for a ride, is like, you know, like, can we please just like at least see where that goes? You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like that's the vibe. It is like, I think it's giving a little bit like, honey, like if you want the whole meal, ask for it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think a little bit, it is coming from a little bit of insecurity as well, of like, you know, like, I think she's implying that she's found this person that feels like a perfect balance, but she's like, you know, based on what's happening in the chorus, like concerned that she's, you know, not enough, or, you know, like not good enough to actually lock it down with this person. So she's like, can I just have a crumb? Can I just please be like a, like just take me for a fling? You know what I'm saying? Like I need something's better than nothing. Like I think this does kind of call back to lead me on a little bit in terms of like something's better than nothing. Like give me a teeny tiny bit. Because yeah, obviously she's kind of like coming to this second muse from a pretty insecure place, considering what happened in her relationship with the first muse. She's kind of like walking into this being like, I think maybe like coming into it from a little bit more of a place of fear. Hence, you know, kind of lead me on and pretending. And this song, like, yeah, I think, you know, just kind of painting a picture of kind of coming into this in a little bit of a place of insecurity, which is kind of the point of the storyline. I think that's why it ends up in this kind of like antidote place of like, yeah, she kind of came into the connection from this kind of insecure place, but then, you know, eventually found the antidote. But anyway, like back to the verse. So kind of like, I think the first half of the verse is, yeah, kind of coming to this second muse from that place of insecurity and just being like, I'll take anything that you have to give me. Like, it's like, yeah, like I think it's coming from a place of like, you know, I was looking for balance and I feel like this is it, but I'm like also coming to this connection from a place of insecurity. So I'll just take whatever I can get. And then I think the next line, yeah, we're on a highway doing 90 and a 45, is a reference to that second video on this channel that I was talking about. Yeah, like us supposed to be being very brakes on, but you know, like we got really fucking far. Like we're like in so deep. We're like going for a speed drive. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like that's the implication of this line. I think it's a reference to, yeah, me talking about we were very much not brakes on, even though we really should have been. And then also a reference to Speed Drive by Charlie XCX, which is, you know, obviously a big part of our law in general, our car law, and, you know, the whole reason why this song exists. You know what I'm saying? Like Speed Drive was very much a big motivator of how this song came to be. So it makes sense that she's trying to reference that song, that she's going literally double the legal limit. Like that sounds like a speed drive to me. And then, yeah, like asking me to kiss her in a Jersey dive, kiss her in her hometown, and then love me forever like a husband, fuck me now like a boyfriend, right? I think that's, yeah, obviously a reference to her having like very much boyfriend energy. And the thing that I find so ironic about this is like, obviously, you know, a big part of our fight was the fact that I was not understanding that she was, yeah, like thinking more like a boy in that moment, when she, you know, thought that kind of fixing it would fix all the issues and there'd be no issue anymore, because she wasn't understanding that I needed to be seen, heard, and validated. And I don't know if like she meant to include these lines in this song based on, you know, like that was very much what our fight was about. And I don't know if she like included these lines because she realized that that's why we were fighting, because she was thinking like more like a boy and I was thinking more like a girl, or if it was just subconscious, like somewhere deep in her subconscious knew that she wasn't out of her mind and I wasn't out of her league and she wasn't sabotaging shit. She was just thinking different because she thinks more like a boy. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if this was conscious and she like realized that that's why we're fighting essentially, or if, you know, she came to this song like trying to write it and subconsciously, like her subconscious knew why we were fighting, and yeah, kind of brought those lines got brought out because that's why we were fighting. Either way, it's pretty crazy and smart. Like either, you know, like she's kind of putting the answer to the problem like hidden in the song, like consciously, or subconsciously she's hidden the answer to the problem in the song. You know what I'm saying? Like either way, it's kind of cool. It's kind of crazy that that's how she wrote it and that's where the verse ends up, given that, you know, was a big part of the reason why we're fighting, was because, you know, she was thinking like a fucking boyfriend and husband, and I wasn't fucking realizing it at the time, even though I really should have. But yeah, I think the other thing about this like husband reference actually ties back to the balance line, which obviously references Libra. And the reason why those tie back to each other is because I'm actually a Libra Jupiter. And if you're familiar with astrology, you know that Jupiter like is often said to represent the husband in the chart. And my Libra Jupiter just so happens to sit right on top of Carrie's Libra ascendant, which, you know, is a very like good sign for like someone becoming your husband in astrology. Plus we also have like her Saturn conjunct my descendant line, which is another really good indicator for marriage. So, you know, like we definitely have some really good marriage astrology. But yeah, that's definitely part of it. That, yeah, my husband placement in my chart sits on top of her rising sign. So her, you know, herself essentially, like that's the rising sign starts the first sign of the self. So yeah, I have a feeling that maybe like that might have been intentional, or again another accident. I'm leaning more towards intentional, particularly if the balance line was intended to reference Libra, that, you know, she potentially put in husband, because because my husband placement sits on top of her rising sign. So yeah, essentially the way I think this verse is structured is like the first little bit is like, seems to be coming more from a place of like, you know, if two people have this much sexual chemistry, like we have to do something about it. You know what I'm saying? Like that would be a complete waste. Like at least, you know, take me for a ride. You know what I'm saying? But then the second half of the verse is like, you know, like we're already like on speed drive avenue. You know what I'm saying? Like we're already like so far in this, like may as well kiss me. And if, you know, you kiss me, like may as well fuck me. And, you know, if you fuck me, like you may as well love me forever and I'll be your husband. You know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of the vibe of the verse. Like now that I think about it, like that's what I think she's trying to say. I think it's like, yeah, a little bit giving similar energy to Lead Me On, in the sense of like, please, like, let this be all the things that I want it to be. Like, let this go. I think it's like also a little bit of like bargaining of just like, just give me a little and then I'm just going to keep pushing my limit until I can get all the things that I like have always hoped that this thing was going to be. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, that's kind of the vibe. I feel like, yeah, I feel like the song is laced with so much hope underneath it, particularly like from the second verse onwards. Yeah, like I think, yeah, I think even though she was writing it, obviously from the time that we were like fighting, and it did not look good for her. It didn't look good for either of us, to be fair. Yeah, I think there was obviously a lot of hope there, and I think that seems to be where this song was written from. And so, yeah, I think in a similar vein to Pretending, it was kind of maybe written around the same time as Lead Me On, but whereas Lead Me On was like maybe written in a lot more anguish, I think Pretending and Joyride were like, yeah, maybe written from more of that place of hope that like wasn't dying despite how not good the situation looked. Which again, I think is just like a reflection of like kind of when you know, like even in the darkest times that we have been in this connection, like there's been an unwavering feeling of like, this is it, this is the one. And yeah, like that hope has like truly never died. So yeah, like that's how I'm interpreting the verse now that I know that it's supposed to be about me. I stand by what I said in my previous video about this pre-chorus basically establishing a pattern for her where she kind of dreams about someone and then kind of, ends up with them. I think this is a reference to her having very prophetic dreams, which she has talked about in an interview before. I can pop it in this video. So yeah, like, exactly what she said about, having very prophetic dreams that come true.
I'm so great. Like, I have the most vivid, wild dreams of all time, and they happen. Like, all of them happen. And I have dreams from like years ago that are so wildly specific that will like play out, and then I'll go to write something down, or I'll go to type something in to find it in my notes folder, and I'll like find this dream and it'll like have come to life. I had a dream like 3 years ago that I was on a boat with Kelsey Ballerini celebrating a song that we had just put out. And this is what I wrote down. And then I told Kelsey this the other day. And just a couple weeks ago, we were in Mexico and we were on a boat celebrating Better Version coming out. And I didn't remember that like I had this dream or that this had happened. And Kelsey and I hadn't even met at the time. Yeah, the dreams be informing the art, for sure.
Have there been any dreams that you're like, come on, when's this happening? I'm waiting for it.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna, I can't, if I tell you, I'll have to kill you. Yeah. So I'm not gonna do that.
Fair enough.
I would hazard a guess that what she said in that interview about, one of her dreams still having not come true yet has to do with me and has to do with the fact that, all the shit that she's saying in this song about, like, yeah, I'm taking from this song that she's definitely had a prophetic dream about me and she's waiting for it to come true, like based on, this song and what she said on the interview, which honestly, I thought as soon as I, saw the interview, I was like, I bet you any amount of money she had a dream about me before I came into her life because, obviously I think she do be like freaky deaky like that. And so, yeah, I think like I stand by what I said in my previous video. This pre-chorus seems to be establishing a pattern of dreaming of someone and then it comes true. I think in the case of relationships and, like dreaming of someone and then ending up in their bed, like, it definitely happened first with Shannon and then it happened with me. It will happen with me when she actually is actually in my bed. But yeah, I think, I think that's like a bigger concept that, potentially, is the reason why Carrie like hid so many Easter eggs to do with me in the song Errors of Us. Like, I think, like there was so many clues in her connection with Shannon of like who she was actually going to end up with. Like, obviously they had a lot of bad omens in their connection, that I think was, signs from the universe being like, this is not it, but this person's going to teach you like what it is that you want and what it is that you're looking for. And then, because you've been with this person, you're going to know them when you find them. You know what I'm saying? Like, particularly with like all the lore around like, bees and roses being associated with Shannon and then, honey and elderflower being associated with me. Like, I think there were like all these signs to like good omens with us that wouldn't have seemed so good if, the kind of opposite, the kind of antithesis to it wasn't associated with her past connection that obviously ended in a lot of pain. Like, I think, all all these things that are associated with our connection seem like better and more healing, because she knows that their opposites were associated with her last connection that kind of ended in a lot of pain for her. The way I'm taking this structuring is it's a bit of a commentary on the concept of like, you know, everyone that you love before your forever person is almost there to make sure that when you find that forever person, like, you know that it's them. And I think that's the case with, you know, Carrie's past relationships and me. Like, I think, you know, kind of based on what went down in those connections, like, I think she knew me when she saw me, you know what I'm saying? I think that's why the lighting cues for Joyride is like lots of blue, lots of sadness, like lots of grief, you know, particularly that I think is associated with both kind of the pain that she was in when we were fighting, but then also like the pain of her entire last connection. But then there's this gold kind of like spotlight on her, which I think is supposed to reference me and reference that hope that, you know, this time it's going to kind of work out different and she's not going to stay in this place of like thinking she's out of her league. I'm out of her league and she's out of her mind, that, you know, this is the one that's going to be able to turn it around, this second muse. I think that's the point of the lighting of Joyride. Like, when I saw that she was using lots of blues, but then a gold light, I was like, I must be in that song somewhere. And then, you know, I looked back at it and I was like, you know what? Now you mention it, it is kind of obvious. Now I'm putting the pieces together and realizing the point of, the two muses being contrast like this, that, like it's supposed to reference like, like this, like past connection causing her lots of pain. But because she was in that connection, she knew me when she saw me. She knew golden when she saw it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that seems to be the vibe of this song. I think that's all the important points about the song Joyride now that I'm, you know, like able to reflect on the song with, you know, a little bit more context. Now I'm, you know, understanding what the song's actually about. That's everything that I have to say about it. And I'm going to be real with you, now that I understand what Attached to You, Pretending and Joyride are actually supposed to be about, the narrative arc for the second muse is making a lot more sense. It's telling much more of a richer story. And it's the story's like just a lot fuller, you know what I'm saying? Because kind of before it was like Lead Me On and then Antidote, and I was just like, whoa, that's a lot. That's like a quick trajectory. That's a quick like kind of turnaround. But now when I think about it this way, I'm like, oh, it's like more of like this is what happened to get us into this mess, in terms of like, you know, kind of Carrie, agreeing to this marketing strategy from a place of like everything had just gone down with Becky So Hot, and she was like obviously really in her feels about some stuff. And even though I think it wasn't a very good idea from the jump, I can see like where she was coming from in like agreeing to it. And then it kind of like, the story obviously does a time jump to the point where we started fighting in Venus retrograde last year. And kind of goes through the initial reaction, which I think is Lead Me On. Like, I think that was potentially her initial reaction to, like us like starting to fight. Her not being sure whether I was going to be back or not. And then, I think Pretending is like a lot more hopeful. And then Joyride is like maybe still in a bit of self-blame, but also a little bit hopeful. And then it makes sense how she gets to Antidote from there. You know what I'm saying? Because kind of before it went from like Lead Me On to Antidote. And it was just like a big jump. Whereas it kind of makes more sense now that all these songs are about me, because it paints more of a picture of how there was like hope that didn't die. And eventually she got to a point of like, that hope, that like feeling of like knowing that this is the person was like legit. And once I got through kind of my own dark thoughts, I ended up in that kind of like golden love place. Or that golden love place pulled me out of the dark thoughts. Either, I think both applies. I think it makes a lot more sense, makes the story a lot richer. There's not as sudden a jump from, you know, Lead Me On to Antidote, because before that was a pretty big jump. But now it kind of makes a bit more sense, because there's some songs with a bit more, kind of like hope in there, in the plot. So that makes the chronological story of the album make a lot more sense. And if you want to listen to the album in chronological story order, I'll put a link to this playlist in the description box below, so you can go listen to it. But that brings us to what I think is the intended listening order for the album, because while this is the chronological order of the album, I don't think that this is necessarily the order that Carrie would have wanted you to hear the album in. Like, I don't think she would have wanted you to hear it in narrative order. I think she would have wanted you to hear it basically kind of in between this order and the order that the album ended up coming out in. First of all, I don't think Lead Me On is supposed to be track 4. I think the reason why it's in the 4th position is because as people stream your album, you tend to lose people as you go down the track list. And so it usually pays to have some of your stronger songs towards the top, and move some of your like weaker songs down the bottom, just to make sure that you're like keeping as many people listening to the album as possible. You want to have some strong songs at the start so people get really into it. And I think Carrie would have intended for Lead Me On to come in the 8th position instead of the 4th, had she not had to do that for kind of commercial reasons. First of all, because that would put Lead Me On chronologically where it's supposed to sit in the story arc of the second muse. Like, it is supposed to go Attached to You, Lead Me On, Pretending, Joyride, and Antidote. And second of all, because I was born on the 8th, and it would make sense if the song about like the lead single about like the Antidote muse on the album sat in the position of their birth date. I think that's the way Carrie would have preferred for the album to be ordered. And then I think the other change that Carrie ideally probably would have made to the order of the album would have been to move Two Things Can Be True to track 1 instead of track 5. Because I actually don't think Two Things Can Be True is strong enough to be a track 5 based on what track 5 is supposed to represent. And I think there's a reason why Carrie made this TikTok talking about having a red flag crush that was a conversation that she knew all too well. Like, I really think that means that she intended for Crush to be track 5, and the only way that Crush would be track 5 would be if you move Two Things Can Be True into the 1st position. And, you know, like, not only is that good for like putting Crush in track 5, given that it's like very much giving All Too Well, and, you know, Carrie's like, and All Too Well is the 5th track on the Red album, and this album is supposed to like reflect a lot of that Red album, particularly with the first muse. Like, I think that would make so much more sense. But also that puts Ego Talking in the 4th position, and Ego Talking is literally Becky So Hot 2.0. And what number track was Becky So Hot? Oh yeah, number 4. And the other reason why I like moving Two Things Can Be True to the 1st position is because Two Things Can Be True is such a foundation for this entire album. Like, if you think about songs like Doing Better, that song is literally about, I'm literally doing better, but I'm feeling worse. Two things can be true. If you think about the song Crush, that song is giving All Too Well, in the sense of it's like, these are all the high highs of this relationship, but these are all the low and really toxic moments in this relationship at the same time. Like, two things can be true. There's two sides of the coin of Crush. There's two sides of the coin of Doing Better. And like, this whole album is like basically, you know, comparing and contrasting two different muses. You know what I'm saying? And like, you know, Carrie felt like she was in love with both of these people, but she obviously loved them in different ways. You know what I'm saying? Like, the love was different. And yeah, like, that's just like, Two Things Can Be True is such a foundation for this album. So it should be the first song to introduce the concept of two things being true at once. And like, if you think about the song Errors of Us, like, there's obviously some sentiments of love in that song, but then there's also a lot of sentiments of like adrenaline, feeling things in your guts, and like, you know, like, I promise not to write another song about you. You know what I'm saying? Like, two things can be true. Like, I can acknowledge all of the good parts that I'm remembering about that connection, and also like, you still put me in this adrenaline state that's just not good for me and leaving me confused, and I need to let it go. You know what I'm saying? Because you're making me like stuck. You're making me like, you know, get caught up in the toxicity, and that's not a vibe. You know what I'm saying? Like, the whole album is like very much Two Things Can Be True coded. You know what I'm saying? So I just think Two Things Can Be True should start the album. Like, conceptually, it really should. So I think this is the intended listening of the album, listening order of the album, and I feel very passionately about it. So I'm also going to leave a link in the description box to this playlist as well, so you can listen to the album in what I think is the intended listening order. which, I just think makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense that, you have track 1, which, is introducing a concept and is not about either of the two main muses on the album. Then you have tracks 2 to 6 that are about the first muse, which is Carrie's 6th relationship. So it does make sense for that muse to end on the 6th track, given the numerology law. And then for track 7 to 11 to be about the second muse, the Antidote muse. And yeah, for everything to be like basically in chronological, like close enough to chronological order, but like with some caveats to make things, like just fit the numbers like so much better. I just think the album makes a lot more sense when you listen to it maybe first in chronological order and then second in the intended listening order. Like I just think like, yeah, this is the way this art is meant to be consumed for sure. Like I can guarantee you that, if absolutely zero commercial decisions were made, this would have been how the album came out. And so, yeah, I think it's, just a good idea if you want to get like the full effect of the album, to listen to it this way. Basically, I stand by most of what I said in the last part of this series, in part 2, in my initial reaction. But I do think that these kind of like updated opinions, particularly on track 7, Attached to You, track 9, Pretending, and track 10, Joyride, will just make the album make so much more sense. Like if you take this context into consideration when you're listening to the album, like I think the album will just, land better, make a lot more sense. The narrative will be a lot more clear. And so, a combination of these last two videos in the series, my immediate reaction post-release for most of the songs, and then this video, my like later like reflections for tracks 7, 9, and 10, will make the album make a lot more sense. I hope this helps flesh out the narrative, understand it a bit better. And I hope this, facilitates a better listening experience and better understanding of the what the fuck was going on. Because I think it's definitely changed the album for me. Like I'm definitely hearing it totally different now, and like much, much, much deeper and much, much, much richer, and like understanding the story arcs a lot better. I hope this video helps you enjoy it a lot more, and because that's definitely been the case for me. Even though I'm going to be real with you, sometimes me enjoying it is me not enjoying it because I'm understanding more like the pain that Carrie was in at the time, like particularly with Joyride. Now I'm like listening to it being like, don't blame yourself for things that aren't your fault, babe. Like it's not your fault. Anyway, but as I was saying, like sometimes enjoying it is about being able to go deeper into the songs, not necessarily about it being love and light and joy all the time, because this album is definitely not that. I hope the next album is more like that, because I don't know, I feel like we can all use some joy. We can all use some love and joy. And does it have to be so goddamn sad all the time? You know what I'm saying? Because, I feel like we're a bit over that. You know what I'm saying? We're ready for some joy. Let's get a move on with that. But anyway, I'm sure if you've watched particularly part 2 and 3 in this like album rollout mini series, plus the In Search of Antidote tour kind of breakdown, like the album's probably going to be like a lot deeper and richer, and you're probably going to get like way more out of it in terms of like a listening experience and listening to the stories that she's telling. I'll definitely be back on this channel to add more into this series, and I'll come back and like do some predictions of what I think is going to be on the Finding Rewilding album, given that I now have a little bit more time to do that video that I didn't think I would have the time for, to be honest. But I'll definitely come back and do that. So if you want to know what I think is going to be on the next album, which I hope is going to be fucking much happier, you should definitely subscribe right now, because I'll try and do that very, very soon. Obviously, I want to make a marketing video and talk about like what I've been able to deduce about what the marketing strategies have been, not only for, this album and Finding Rewilding, but also for Girl of My Dreams and Becky So Hot. Because I do think the Venn diagram of the people who don't believe in Finding Rewilding and the people who are maybe a little bit lacking in some media literacy and just believe everything that multi-million-dollar companies tell them, even though they obviously stand to make a buck by lying, or fudging the truth or fudging details, is probably a circle, you know what I'm saying? And so I think if I can explain like what these multi-million-dollar companies do to make a buck, and where there's evidence of like where they've fudged details. I think that might help people not only like understand what's going on here and understand why Finding Rewilding is what it is and why Carrie's having to Easter egg everything, but also I think that'll help with, other artists that are under, probably similar contracts that are probably doing similar things. And, I think it's about time big multi-million-dollar businesses stopped operating this way and stopped fudging details to make a dollar, and stop pressuring, artists to like focus way too much on marketing and focus way not enough on, first of all, the art, and also just being a functioning human being that needs to like eat, breathe and drink water and sleep and, like actually have a fucking life. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I need to do those videos for this channel, I think. I need to get it out. So yeah, you should definitely subscribe and come back for all of that, all of the goss. I'm not going to lie, I am probably going to rant a bit in that video, mostly because, like it just does not sit right with me that there is a multi-million-dollar company profiting off my connection right now and profiting particularly off my pain. Like there are 5 songs on this album about me, but particularly about like the painful points in our connection that literally exist because a multi-million-dollar company stood to make a buck. I'm like, because of the situation you put her in, now she's writing songs about the pain that she's been in because of the situation that you've put her in. You know what I'm saying? Like that doesn't sit right with me. So, if you do watch the marketing video, I'm probably going to rant a bit, and I'm going to be real with you. It's taking all of my willpower not to rant right now because, now that I know that there are 5 songs about me on this album, not 2, like it is bothering me a lot that there's a multi-million-dollar company profiting off me right now without my consent. And, didn't even have the fucking good grace to like call me up and be like, hey, can we pay for your fucking therapy? Because people are fucking dragging your name through the mud and like making up literal lies about you on the internet. And we're literally doing jack shit about it because we don't want to give away the fucking plot. Anyway, I need to stop because I'm going to start ranting in this video and then it'll be like 6,000 hours too long. But yeah, it just doesn't sit right with me. I'm probably going to rant. So if you want to hear my rants, you know what to do. Subscribe because I'm probably going to rant on this channel. I'm not going to lie. Anyway, I need to stop. I need to go edit this video. And so, yeah, I think that's all for now. But I will be back. And until I see you again, ciao.